Hello, Namaste. Welcome to Dev's Hammer Show. This is the flagship weekly television shows of Indigenous Television. Through this television show, I try to bring the voices of Indigenous peoples from around the world, and I try to connect their successes, struggles with one another. I sometimes conduct online video conferences, sometimes I conduct face-to-face interview and discuss about various contemporary issues affecting Indigenous peoples. Today I have a very special topic to discuss. I'm going to discuss about the culture and cultural diversity. When we talk about the cultures, Indigenous peoples no doubt are one of the custodians of cultures. UN General Assembly in the year 2002 declared May 21st as World's Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. And today I'm going to discuss about very same theme with a special guest who is no other than UN Resident Coordinator in Nepal. Her name is Valerie Julliand. And let me welcome her first of all in my show. Your Honor, first of all, it's my honor to have you in my show, and first of all, I would like to welcome.
Thank you very much. Namaste, and thank you for having me in your program.
So, as we are in Nepal, and obviously you know well that Nepal is a country of cultural diversity, right? And the culture itself is one of the connecting forces for bringing people together, right? Bringing different class, creed together. And you represent obviously a distinct culture as well, and as I do, right? And in this sense, I would like to ask you to begin with, and right, especially what values basically do you see on the cultural diversity, and why does this cultural diversity matters for us?
I think it's a very important topic to discuss about cultural diversity, but let me first set the stage. Because as UN, our starting point is always human rights. And when you look at human rights, actually, in the declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Article 27.1 says everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community. So it means that we have the right to our culture. But at the same time, in the UNESCO Declaration on Cultural Diversity, it says that no one may invoke cultural diversity to infringe upon human rights guaranteed by international laws. So what it means that while we have the right to our culture, culture cannot limit human rights. And the reason why I mention this is because cultural diversity is essential to actually not limit human rights. Because too often the people who want to limit cultural diversity are the very same who violate human rights. Cultural diversity matters because it is our identity. It defines who we are. So as I say, as human beings, you and I, we have the same rights. We are the same. But you have a different culture than I have. You may have a different religion than I have. You certainly have a different language than I have. And all this is essential because it represents who we are. And actually, the cultural diversity is essential for the survival of humanity. Humanity is our diversity. And that's why I want to put this in perspective of the rights that we have. The rights makes us the same. We don't have the same rights because we are equal. We are equal because we have the same rights. But then, in this equality, we have our differences, which are cultural essentially, and should be recognized as an asset.
You very well elaborated about the diverse culture. And cultural diversity obviously means having a different culture, right? The cultural experts, rightly say that if one individual coming from one cultural background respect another, right? Individual coming from different culture, that may result peace, right? But there are many examples that disrespect of another's culture basically has resulted a conflict, right? In that sense, I would like to listen your your experiences and observations, how a culture can be assets for the peace, for maintenance of peace.
Actually, let me first answer your question by why negation of diversity leads to war. Because actually, wars are the results of ignorance. It's usually you hate the other, you want to annihilate the other because you don't know who the other is or you don't accept it. Actually, do you remember when during the war in Afghanistan the Buddhas were destroyed? And actually one has to understand is that the destruction of cultural heritage has an enormous impact on humanity. So actually, in order to sustain peace, you have to recognize the other. And that's why cultural diversity, the more we will promote our diversity, the more we will make people aware of our differences, the more we can promote peace, because it's in recognizing the other that we can understand the other, and therefore go to peace. What is interesting is to see also, for instance, cultural diversity, the role it has played. Look, for instance, in the case of Nepal after the earthquake. It was so important for people to save their cultural heritage. I was not in Nepal at the time, but I remember people told me how the citizens of Patan went together to save their cultural heritage. And one would think that actually at this time people would consider their home as something more important. But no, they considered their culture and in its diversity as an important asset to preserve. So actually, because ignorance leads to war, education leads to peace. And the more we are educated on the different cultures, on the differences that exist between people, the more we can sustain peace.
So that means you said two things. One is respect, and other is recognitions, right, of one another culture that basically brings a kind of peace,
Yep.
Also development, right?
Absolutely. Actually, development and human rights are essential. Let's say everybody has the right to development. However, development is not let's say a global pattern. The development in Nepal is different from the development in my country, it's different from the development in Africa. People have the same rights, but development has to integrate the differences of people, because otherwise it doesn't work. I remember myself when I was in Yugoslavia during the war. Sometimes little knowledge of the culture of people makes a big difference. Some of the food packages that were distributed for people during the war contain a type of food that people didn't know, and subsequently they didn't eat it because they just didn't know how to cook it. It was in the case of lentils. They didn't know lentils in Yugoslavia at the time of the war. So the lentils that was put in this package couldn't be used by people because they didn't know what it was. It's an example, very practical one. But it means that when you do development, you need to tailor development to the culture of people, to their way of living. You can't build the same houses everywhere. You have to consider what's the way of living of people. Religion plays a big role as well. Art. So I would say you cannot distinguish cultural diversity and development, because if we were to forget cultural diversity while doing development, first of all, we would not respond to the expectations of people. Secondly, we would create a world that would be so uniform that it would have no flavor, no color. And also, let's not forget that the most sustainable solution to development are usually found through consultation with people. Why so? Because people in their diversity know how development should go. They know what is best for them. Hence, cultural diversity becomes an asset for development, because it's rooting our development in the vision and expectations of people through consultation helps us in finding the best solution.
As you connected the culture with war and peace as well. And this culture obviously is also often connected with the development, right? Mm-hmm. And the UN, especially after the 2015, actually has launched ambitious plan, the sustainable development, right?
Absolutely.
That is also called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, right? So in these connections at the outset of this SDG, I would like to ask you or know, what is connections between culture and sustainable development?
Actually, the SDG recognize that the cultural heritage, the tangible and intangible one, is essential for development. There is actually the article, the SDG target 11.4, that calls to strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. And that's why it's so important. But there are challenges. You know, it's very difficult sometimes to convince government that they need to have policies that integrate the development and cultural diversity. And that's why the SDGs have embraced this, because the SDGs represent the most ambitious agenda for the world's development, for the development of humanity. And therefore, we recognize that we need food, we need education, we need health, we need equality between people, we need economic development, we need climate change adaptation measures, but we need also to protect and safeguard the cultural diversity and cultural rights. But even before the SDGs, we had the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, for instance, which is an element of it. Because the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People not only recognizes the individual rights of Indigenous people equal to the rights of everybody else, but also the collective rights and specific individual rights that had not been considered under the Charter or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And all this is constitutive of the reflection that led to the SDGs. So the SDGs really representing, as I say, this most ambitious agenda, as the Secretary General has said, cannot leave on the side the diversity of people. And you see, this diversity, this cultural diversity, is not only within each and every article, but it is also in the SDG 16 that looks at governance, rule of law, and human rights. Because once again, people have the right to express their own culture and diversity. So that's why the SDGs are today the main agenda for the world. The 193 members of the United States have signed on it. Nepal is very active on it. And that's why it's so crucial to address this issue of cultural diversity.
You rightly mentioned that government basically are meant to include cultures when they make policies or any sort of rules, right? Basically policies and programs. But often the government are ignorant about the cultures, and they have forgotten to include culture in the development when they make policies, right? In that sense, do you see any challenges, right? What are basically challenges how a government should include culture into development policies and programs so that they can best address the problems of this community who have, diverse cultures?
When it comes to cultural diversity, when it comes to these issues, the main challenge, whether it is at government level or people level, is ignorance, is preconceived ideas, it is prejudice. And actually, the best solution is education. So I would say, of course, it's a long-term vision, but in order to have tomorrow government who include spontaneously cultural diversity in their policies, in their plan of action, is to first start to educate our children. So it starts from the very early age to make sure that children understand that we are different. We have the same rights, but we are different. Because you see, children that are educated will become adults who will put pressure on the governments, on their governments as citizens, to get these policies. But also, they will become a new breed of political leaders. So actually, the main challenge is ignorance. But also, one has to understand is that very often governments tend to look at issues that are global for all the people. So they think uniformity. But you see, we can think to everybody without having a uniform approach. A uniform approach, culturally speaking. We talk about universality, for instance, of social protection, because depending on who you are, indigenous person or not, women, men, child, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, we should all have the same social protection. However, the way sometimes to deliver it should vary depending on cultural sensitivity. And that's why it's so important. But the main challenge, in my view, is ignorance. The second challenge often is that government functioning by priority tend to take economic priority, political priority over cultural priority. But it's a big mistake, because even our political landscape is defined by our culture. The political landscape in Nepal is different from the political landscape, let's say, in Mali. So that's why actually culture should not be put on the back burner when it comes to political decisions and policies. And actually, because doing so, you deny the right to a person to express himself or herself through its culture. And in that sense, you violate the rights of people.
So you basically lay down some of the challenges, and one of the major challenges was ignorance, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And in your view, what are the solutions, let's say, what are the solutions and how those challenges can best be addressed?
So as I say, it's education, but of course, let's not forget we should start now with our children. But that's why intercultural dialogues are so important. When you bring people together, they realize how similar they are in their basic preoccupations and how their diversity can enrich each other. And actually, as UN, the fundamental element of the UN functioning is dialogue and diplomacy, because we believe that actually only through dialogue you can find solution to problems. There is no other solution than dialogue. For instance, between countries, if you don't dialogue, you go to war. In a family, if you don't dialogue between members of the family, you go into a dispute. So actually, dialogue is essential to sustaining good solution and peace. Intercultural dialogue increases awareness, understanding of what the others are. Let me give you another example of my experience in the world. I was in Haiti during the earthquake in Haiti. And you know, Haiti is on an island, and Haiti as a country shares the island with Dominican Republic. There are some tension between these two countries that share one same island. Mostly, I would say, racial issues. You have a black population on one side and another population on the other side. A lot of prejudice existed between the Dominican and the Haitian. Also, you have a more developed country and a less developed country. After the earthquake, moved by their generosity, the Dominican people went en masse to help the Haitian people. On that occasion, they had a dialogue. They had an interconnection. And all of them who were coming back were saying, wow, the Haitian people are very nice. Oh, we understand them. Because when you dialogue, you start to understand the other. And that's why the intercultural dialogue is so critical.
You really brought really good aspects, even in 2001, when Unesco, one of the specialized agencies of UN, actually adopted Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity. Following that same year, the UN General Assembly actually declared May 21 as the World Day for Cultural Diversity, for dialogue and the development, right? Dialogue and development. And you rightly said that intercultural dialogue is very important and it is necessary, as you said. And you gave some of the examples also, as you are already in Nepal for more than 2 years now, in 2003 years. So how do you see the intercultural dialogues taking place in such a diverse, cultural society like Nepal?
First of all, I must say, I arrived then in 2016, after the earthquake and after the promulgation of the Constitution. And I want to say that I think that the Constitution of Nepal is, from that perspective, a very good example, because it recognizes the diversity of Nepal. It recognizes that the people of Nepal is not one and only. It's composed of a mosaic of culture and people. And that's why actually the Constitution also caters for the representation of women, of Dalit, and of other indigenous groups at the level of local representation as well as national representation. So this in itself is a very important basis for a dialogue in Nepal, because if the people who rule Nepal represent the people who live in Nepal, then in itself this is an element of stability and peace. So I think that in that case, Nepal has made big progress. There is also this Indigenous National Commission that exists, that has a specific role, and this is also very important that Nepal be equipped with such a commission, because it means that it recognizes there are some indigenous people. It has a commission on women, it has a commission on Muslims, it has a commission on the Madesi people. So in that sense, I think there is a very good base for the dialogue in Nepal. Another element which I think is a good element for dialogue in Nepal is what I perceive, now it will be my personal perception, of a characteristic of the Nepali people. I find the Nepali people to be peaceful people. They are not aggressive. I don't feel aggressivity in this country at all. And I've been to many places in the world, trust me. And here I feel that the Nepali people are generally speaking peaceful people. So I think that if the government offers a platform through its constitution, through the commissions, and maybe through other means that can be suggested by the people themselves to foster an exchange, a dialogue, an understanding, then we have very good basis. So I think that there is in Nepal really a good base for that. Now, this being said, I don't think that enough is done today to really safeguard and protect the cultural diversity of Nepal, especially when it comes to indigenous people, whose rights still need to be further protected and respected. We know, for instance, the debate that exists now on the project of extension of the road, for instance, where maybe cultural heritage or specificity of the cultural rights of indigenous people are not necessarily considered. So we as UN always encourage governments to go through a mode of dialogue and consultation when they do development. Because you see, road expansion, installation of an industry somewhere, always you need to consult the people.
So as you represent as UN resident coordinator in Nepal, and obviously as you said, UN itself was founded for dialogue, right?
Exactly.
Intercultural dialogue and diplomacy. And here in Nepal we have a good bunch of UN agencies working in. And what do you see the role of, how these UN agencies in Nepal are promoting this intercultural dialogue? They also have some role, right?
Oh, definitely. I would say the UN has a key role to play, as you pointed out. I mean, this is really what defines us. What is interesting is that UN represents the global community. But once again, not the global community in its uniformity. It's the global community in its plurality and diversity. So therefore, for instance, if you take our team, UN team here in Nepal, we have as a main strategy to focus on the inclusive economic development. That is to say, include everybody in your development, and especially the ones that are left behind, make sure that they are included in the economic development. Social development, which is important, education, health, considering the diversity. We have the resilience and climate change that can be so much enhanced with the knowledge that different communities have of their own environment. And of course, governance, rule of law, and support to the federalization process. This is our strategy. But as a transversal issue, is a focus on women, is a focus on youth, is a focus on cultural diversity. This is a kind of red thread that goes throughout our activities. But beside that, we have UNESCO, which is really the main agency that looks after culture and education. And once again, I was telling you earlier on that education is central to promote cultural diversity, because it promotes tolerance, it promotes understanding, it makes people more intelligent. So the role of UNESCO in that sense is critical. And the declaration, the Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity of UNESCO, let's not forget that it came on the heel of the very sad event of 9/11. And what were the event of 9/11? They were the perception by some few people that there was a clash of culture and civilization. And what UNESCO wanted to state through this declaration is that we don't believe in that theory, that cultures and civilization should clash. This is not true. Culture and civilization are the makeup of our humanity, and we can live harmoniously respecting each other.
When we talk about the intercultural dialogue, obviously the government has a role to play, UN agencies have a role to play, and we, like media personals, we also, try to build a kind of intercultural dialogue by creating our spaces, right? But then, as experts or UN agencies, how you see our role, media's role in, creating intercultural dialogues?
First, I will tell you that before becoming UN, I started my career as a journalist. And for me, the reasoning that led me to become a journalist and the one that led me to become a UN civil servant is exactly the same logic, because I believe in the logic of ethics, in the logic of respect. So the media have a very critical role. First of all, it's thanks to the media that we know what's happening in the world. It's thanks to the media that we know that my neighbor far away is like this. Otherwise, how would I know? It's thanks to the media that I know also what my rights are. So the media is essential. All the medias that exist in the world are essential to disseminate information, to educate people, to raise awareness. So therefore the role of media is so critical to promote cultural diversity, to explain it, to make people understand the value it brings into life and society. But then this has to be done with a high sense of ethics. And that's why ethical journalism is the only journalism that should exist. If journalism is not ethical, it is not journalism. And that's why, for instance, the role of media. Today we are in the era of social media, of internet, where you can find everything and nothing and whatever. So that's why it's so important that the media, in playing their role as really journalists, make a difference with the wannabe journalist on internet. Because you see, placing an information on internet doesn't make of you a journalist. A journalist is a person who has a profession, who has an ethic, and can really spread the information in the ethical manner. So media are really critical. And I would say I welcome the existence of your channel because it's essential to look at the rights of indigenous people and maybe address them in a particular manner. But you, as all the journalists in Nepal, have a crucial role in spreading the diversity of Nepal. And that's why as UN also, we encourage government to give funds to a different linguistic approach to media, fund different activities to promote diversity of languages. And media also should be in different languages, and I know your network is. And that's essential, because also languages represent our cultural diversity. So in that sense, media can be both using local languages, spreading universal values, and therefore we close the circle like this. So the role of media is essential, but badly used, we see what it happens. You see on internet how the hate speech and all the very bad propaganda that is being done, that lead people to take stupid action and to commit horrible crime. I mean, most of the tragic events that we have heard of lately in the world are actually people, those crazy people who have committed these acts have been fed mostly by internet. So that's why I think that journalists in the world should also unite to make sure that you also impact on all the media, not only the one you're responsible for, but also help in protecting internet so that internet is a source of raising awareness and information, because it's also a magnificent tool, internet. I mean, I didn't grow up with internet. My son grew up with internet, and I see the difference in terms of knowledge and understanding and comprehension of the world. My son is by far, I would say, much more aware of so many things at his early age than I was at the same age as his. So media are critical, but I want to repeat, ethical media. And no one who violates the rights of other people, who uses media to spread hate speech or else, no one can be called a journalist if they do that. A journalist is a person who has an ethic, and therefore a dignified media, is a media that will promote the diversity, the universal values and principles.
We have come almost at the end, and we are discussing about the World Day for Cultural Diversity as a special theme. So at last, I would like to request you, if you have one concrete message on this occasion, right, about the cultural diversity, right, increasing intercultural dialogue, if you have one line thin message for the viewers.
Well, I think I've given you my messages throughout the interview. Maybe the main one, especially in Nepal, is that your diversity is your richness. This is what makes the people of Nepal so beautiful. This is what makes Nepal so beautiful. Erase that diversity, transform Nepal in only one type. Then Nepal loses all its flavor, all its charm. So I would say preserving our diversity, it's preserving our humanity, as well as preserving our beauty. And beauty in a complete sense, you know, the beauty that we have in and out, the beauty that defines us. So I would say that's the first message. And maybe the second one is that carry on discussing, people of Nepal, carry on knowing each other and respecting each other, because like this you will continue to consolidate the basis of peace and development in your country. So your cultural diversity is your main asset for development. For instance, the government has decided to put a big emphasis on tourism, rightly so. If really Nepal capitalizes on the cultural diversity as an element of tourism, tomorrow Nepal will have so many tourists coming because that is your asset.
Thank you, Your Honor, for your time as well as esteemed thought.
Thank you very much.
So I have come to the end of the program, and today basically we discussed about the cultural diversity based on the theme of the upcoming, let's say, World Day for Cultural Diversity. And next week I will come with a special theme with new guests, and by then have a good day. Bye-bye.